Hello and welcome to Bar 20 Arms. Today we're going to do a Glock video. I have in front of me Glock 23. It's the compact 40 Smith & Wesson. I have the Glock 22, commonly referred to as a service pistol. It's also in a 40 Smith & Wesson. And the Glock 20, the 10mm. It's an ex-service pistol. Today I want to show you disassembly process as well as changing out the trigger transfer bar for a lighter trigger pull. It'll make your range experience much better. Alright, so let's go ahead and get started. First off, you want to make sure that the chamber is empty and there is no magazine in the magazine well. So we'll visually check that. It is empty. There is no magazine. So we're ready to disassemble. First step is to pull the trigger. You slide the slide to the rear slightly, just enough really that the barrel drops down into the frame. You'll pull the slide release on both sides, on this side and this side. Pull it evenly straight down, and then slide your slide forward off the lower frame. Now we're going to get started on the slide assembly first. It's really easy. The first thing to do is remove the recoil spring. You just pull it up and out. The barrel you do the same. Straight up, slide it forward just a little bit, and then straight to the back and out. Now we'll get started with the rest. The only thing we lack here is the firing pin, the plunger, and the extractor. So the first thing you want to do is behind or in front of the firing pin, there's a black plastic sheath that covers the firing pin. You'll want to place your screwdriver in between the firing pin and that plastic wrap or cover, and then you push it forward. At the same time, you slightly pull up on the plastic back plate. And once you've pulled it out just a little bit, you've broke it loose. So now all you got to do, you can set it down, set your screwdriver to the side, use both hands. You'll want to hold the slide with one hand and slide the back plate off. At the same time holding it, just making sure that the plunger doesn't come shooting out. So now you have your plastic back plate removed. You'll pull your firing pin straight out, set it to the side, pull your plunger out, set it to the side, and then right here is your the extractor keeper pin. Basically it just maintains that the extractor stays in its position. So you push down on it, at the same time you just kind of shake out the extractor and pull it out. Now at this point you would clean this slide from front to back. You'll make sure you get in there with pipe cleaners, whatever you can really, just to get it as clean as you can possibly get it. There's a lot of carbon buildup that happens in the extractor region. So you just want to clean it and maintain that. The neat thing about the Glock pistol is you don't have to do that a lot. I do it every once in a while, but it's really not a requirement by this pistol. It can be as dirty as can be and still fire and function fine. But if you're like me, you like to clean your gun, so you'll want to do this from time to time. Our second part of this is the lower receiver. This is where it gets a little bit tricky, but it's not too bad. Anybody can still do this. Basically, you'll want to start with the forward pin, or the top pin in the receiver, and you want to drive it out. You can use a pretty much anything, a pen, anything you push out. A pen, just a regular ink pen. Would you happen to have an ink pen? You push the pin out. That's not deep enough. I'm going to have to go a little farther. Ideally, you would use a use a punch set ideally, obviously not to leave tool marks. You push the top pin out. Top pin is right there. And then the lower pin, which holds the trigger assembly, or the trigger, and the lower part of the block. Now this is where it gets a little tricky. Sometimes you gotta mess with the trigger a little bit, and it's gotta just get it in a position to loosen up. So you pull on the trigger just a little bit, pull it back and forth, and then at the same time you're pushing on the pin. The pin will come out. And you go ahead and pull the pin out of the frame. Once you do that, you've released the slide stop and the block out of the frame. So you pull that out. May need to use a stiffer punch. That fits in there pretty tight, so. And remove that from the frame. You set that to the side. Obviously all this you'll come back later and wipe off, clean, and lubricate as needed. The last pin to remove the whole assembly is in the rear of the pistol grip. And all you do, this is a plastic pin, so you don't have to use a lot of force. You just push it out, set it down. At this point, everything is released from the frame. All the internal workings come out as one piece. Now you may have to move it back and forth a little bit, kind of work it around. If you have to, you can put a punch in there and just loosely, easily, slightly pull the assembly out. Now you have everything here. The slide is completely taken, or the lower frame is completely taken apart. You cannot take it down any farther other than the slide release, but I don't see a need to do that, so I usually don't even mess with that. Okay, this is where your trigger transfer bar is at. This is where all your internal workings for the trigger is. At this point, the only thing you do is pull the trigger bar straight back and then pull it up and out to pull it out of the plastic frame. This is your trigger transfer bar. Stick a screwdriver underneath it, slightly rotate the screwdriver to pull it out of the frame, and that's it. You replace it with your 3.5 pound connector. You can get that from Cheaper Than Dirt. You can get it from really any retailer that does any gun parts or aftermarket parts. I've already outfitted all of my Glocks with the 3.5 pound connector. Every time I buy a Glock, that's the first thing I do. It just makes your range experience a little bit better. It's a little smoother trigger action and easier to shoot. So now that you have it completely disassembled, you just work in reverse. Now if this is your first time doing it, you'll want to do it real slow. You'll want to go real easy, lay your parts out in groups or sections, slide parts, frame parts, whatever makes it easier for you. So we've stuck our trigger transfer bar back in the slot. Pull your trigger group back around to the front of the frame, the plastic frame. And basically it has a slot right here on the triggering group. And that fits into this slot on the housing. So you pull it forward. Obviously it's got a spring on it. Pull it forward and then kind of finagle it down in there and put it in the slot. Now the triggering group's reassembled. That's really all there is to it. We'll reassemble it back into the frame. You can't go wrong here. There's only one way it fits. You just put it in there and it should easily go back into position. Now you have your triggering group in there and your trigger. Replace the block. And it's the same way. It's one way. You cannot put it in the wrong way. It's impossible to do. Your slide stop. It's got a little spring on it. That's kind of a tricky part there. We're getting to that. Alright, now you can go ahead and put in your top pin that went into the loading block. It's easier to start there because your slide stop, that spring, it actually goes underneath that pin. So it's easier to start there. You stick that in there. It's going to be hard to show you, but go ahead and work it in there. Use a screwdriver, push that spring, push it down a little bit as you're driving in the pin. Sometimes you may have to do it a couple times. If you're like me, you'll get real frustrated and get mad and maybe put it down every once in a while and then come back to it. But once you get the hang of it, it usually goes pretty quick. This time it's been a little harder than normal. But you definitely want to make sure and put, don't give up. You got to make sure and get it underneath it, because if you don't, get it underneath it, you lose the spring action, and it won't pop up when it needs to. Okay, now you can go ahead and put in your lower pin. And this one takes a little bit of force because it has a slot in it that's got to go, that it fits into, and you gotta kind of drive it in there a little bit. Well, make sure your block's down, your triggering. And it's the same way as disassembly. You may have to mess with the trigger a little bit. It's not going, so we'll look at it again. Okay. Obviously you want to make sure and hold the, there we go. Alright. There we go. Go ahead and test everything here. We have spring action, so we're good there. Alright. Lastly, the plastic pin that goes in the grip. It can go in either way. Doesn't really matter. It fits either way. Don't beat on it. It's plastic, so you will break it if you're not careful. Basically, just push it in until it's even on both sides. It don't have to be anything exact. You just don't want it sticking out one side or the other of the frame, because it's going to catch your hand. So now our frame is assembled. We'll go back to the slide. This is the same process as disassembly. Put your extractor, put your spring and the pin. You'll push it down and then push the extractor in and then let go. And that's what keeps the extractor in place. Put your plunger, spring goes down. There's a specific hole. Once again, you can't mess it up. There's only one way this will go together. Firing pin, back plate. This, you slide in slightly, you get it started, use your screwdriver, push in the plastic cover to the firing pin, let go of that, push it forward up against the plunger, and then go ahead and push the plunger down completely. You'll have to watch out, because if you slip off of it, it's a good possibility to shoot across the room. Once you get it in place, all you do is push the back plate completely up until it stops. And that's it. That part's assembled. It's ready to go. Drop your barrel back in. You drop it, the barrel muzzle end in first. Run it out the slide. Bring it back to lockup. Put your spring back in there. As a fully assembled slide. Put your lower back on the slide. Wrap it back. It's ready to go. Now you function test it. Slide stop works. Slide actions. Once again, check it. Has no shell in the chamber. We'll go ahead and just pull the trigger. Functions fine. It's ready to go with 3.5 pound connector and completely disassembled, reassembled. Thanks for watching. Come back and see us, Par 20 arms.